Welcome folks to arguably the most hybrid deck that it comes to in Vanguard Overdress. So today we're going to be taking a look at Gravidia Worlds. Of course, this deck has evolved a lot over time. It started off as this kind of deck that was very much like, playing it pure felt super high rolly and explosive, but then would run out of gas really easily once they play against them. They can take out their attackers. And that's basically why the world version of the deck started to exist, because people started to play the Orpha support in this deck in order to patch up those weaknesses and have more attackers and have better columns and have a stronger early game that it was severely lacking. And as a result, we saw a lot of these decks top during BRO 2021. Some lists were more close to the pure version. Then there was Solemn's list that was kind of like a huge outlier in general compared to like the previous deck building. And then there was Kelvin's and Derek's list, which was quite similar to what I run as well. And so with that in mind, let's get into it and talk about the deck so I can actually explain to you why people are playing this archetype. Also, all of my Branchius Ps are split between my Orphist and my Seraph Snow decks, so this is not going to be very blinged out. So of course, for the right deck, we run, virtually any starter you want, the Rutis, the Cubizia, as well as the Gravidia. So this probably already looks a little bit off, and some people already go like, oh no, you're supposed to play pure decks, supposed to play the Gravidia red line, but no, let's talk about it, right? So starter, of course, can be anything, as long as it has the when you ride over it going second draw card effect. Then we play one Rutis, because Rutis's effect when you ride him to search for a world is really good. The Gravidia grade 1 lets you look at top 7 for any amount of meteors, which is also nice when you're playing it pure, but searching out the world means that we have a body on the board on turn 2, which allows us to actually have a more aggressive turn 2 and be able to close out the game faster. Cubizia also helps with this. Some people play the Gravidia grade 2 while playing Rutis as well, because that way you get the soul, like the soul blast to draw and the power, and also you get the world. But I think running Cubizia allows you to play the world and then distribute that 5k power he gives to something else that will then in addition help you push that aggro, or just give it to himself so the 15 is awkward to 1 card guard. And finally, of course, Gravidia is the main grade 3, so we do want to run it as the main grade 3 in the right deck too, because of course when we ride it we get to search our whole deck for 2 meteors and put them into the order zone and then shuffle the deck. So basically the early game is very Orphist like, and then after that you start to go into the meteors, and of course the meteors are inherent draw when you search them with Gravidia's effect, so you immediately get to draw 2 by just riding her. And then on top of that, when you attack with her, you can counterblast 1 and put 1 or more meteors from your order zone into your drop, and then she gets plus 15k power, and if you put 3 or more meteors she gets a crit, and if you put 5 or more meteors then all of your triggers activate twice. So that's a really nice thing where you basically just adapt to the game state, right? If you're playing against somebody that went super ham on you early game, you can pop 3 to get the crit and the power and also ruin their board. But if you're playing against Bruce that hasn't called anything and they have an empty board, then just don't use any meteors, or just use 1 for the power gain, right? Kind of play accordingly. And this deck, all the players I've talked to and I asked them like, oh, what do you do in this situation, do in this situation? They're like, there's no clear-cut goal or like objective with this deck. It's like, or there is an objective, but everything you do in this deck really adapts to the situation and adapts to the matchups and like what your opponent is throwing at you. So it's never really like a clear-cut like, oh, do this, do that, and then you'll win. It's much more of like, oh, if your opponent does this, then you can do this. If they do this, then you do that. So if your opponent's being aggressive, then you get a bit more greedy with your meteors. But if they're, passing on empty boards, then is it worth it? Like, have you compressed your deck enough? Is it mostly just triggers? Maybe then it's worth to go for the 5. Like, you generally almost never go for the 5. It's usually either 1 or 3. But, we've seen in the EU finals that sometimes going for the 5 is a huge pressure that makes your opponent play, into you, which is also very good. So that's the right deck. Now I'm going to take a look at the orders. I do want to break down the orders. And so we're playing a total of 5 plus 4 meteors. So we're playing 9 of them total. I do kind of want to make space for the 10th one, but honestly it's really hard to make space in this deck for anything. And honestly 9 meteors feels a little low at times, but that's because you have to be really careful with how you manage your resources and when you pop them, because with this you get basically 3 instances of 3 meteors, so you do want to pop just 1 at times, right? If you don't know what the meteors do, they're grade 1 set orders that you put in your order zone. You can have up to 16 of them in your deck, and when they're put into the order zone you may soul charge once. You don't have to, but you may. And if it's put by your Vanguard's ability into the order zone, then you may draw a card. Again, if you're going to deck out, then you don't have to, but generally you're going to draw. And then when they're put from the order zone into the drop zone, then you can choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. So that's what Gravidia's effect actually activates. So 9 feels like an okay number, because you still get quite a lot of usage out of them and you can hit them quite consistently. You generally want to be sitting on 3 as much as possible, and so for that reason I think it's quite good. Now the other order I do play, and I've bumped it to a 2 of, is the Eclipsed Moonlight. Eclipsed Moonlight is a set order world, right? And so worlds, you know, they do activate even in this deck, but only when you only have world cards in the order zone. So when you play this and put it into the order zone and you can almost want to play it, you call a Shadow Army token, which of course is a 15k body. So it's one of these dudes if you're not familiar with him yet. And so you get a 15k body for 1 counterblast, and on top of that this says if you only have world cards in your order zone, which you see over here, it says world, then you go into either the Dark Knight state if you have 1 world card, but if you have 2 you go into Abyssal Dark Knight. But it does say you have to have only world cards, right? So people go like, oh, that doesn't work, you'd never go into Dark Knight, right? Well, if you attack with Gravidia first and get rid of all the meteors that you have, then you only have these, and then during the battle phase you'll be in Dark Knight or Abyssal Dark Knight. So for that reason I do quite like it, and I think just having the second copy really is nice to have the second Shadow Army token at your disposal too, so that's why I'm playing 2. Of course, then goes without saying we do play 3 copies of remaining Gravidia, because Persona Ride is very important in this deck, because not only is Persona Ride good, it also searches 2 more of the meteors from your deck and puts them into the order zone, so you get to card draw from them too. So you basically draw 3 just from riding, which is very, very powerful. Looking at the grade 2s, and yes, I do not play the grade 3 that attacks for 23 when you have more rears than your opponent. I'm just not a big fan of that card. I've tested it quite a bit myself, but I'm just not a big fan. So instead I play that second order, and I also play, of course, quite a few of the Gravidia supports. So we play Gravidia Stanner. Stanner is a very nice double rare. If your drop and order zone have a total of 5 or more set orders between them, then it gets plus 5k and plus 5k shield, plus 5k power during both players' turns on both Rearguard and Guardian circles. So this is really nice because this will be a 15k attacker at all times, so you can make it into 23 with just an 8k boost. And on top of that, it's a 10k shield, which every deck loves having 10k shields. So Stanner, she's simple, right? She doesn't need, don't need to have a PhD to understand why she's good. 15k attacker, 10k shield, very easy to achieve because you just have to have like, like 5 meteors or like 5, worlds plus meteors combined is pretty easy to hit between your order zone and your drop zone, so that's why you run 3. And then 1 copy of the Barringer. I still do like having 1 copy of Barringer because Barringer says when placed on Vanguard or Rearguard circle, if you have a meteor in your order zone, so you do have to have 1, be careful about that, you can Soul Blast 3 to draw 1 and she gets plus 5k power. And then she has a second skill that says it's the same as Barringer, continuous if you have your drop zone and order zone have a total of 5 or more set orders, then she gets plus 5. So she's a 20k attacker on her own, which means she makes 28 with grade 1s, and it's pretty easy to achieve that. It's pretty easy to hit those numbers. So again, just a good attacker, and also like the little bit of card draw that we might need to use our soul, because we don't use our soul for anything else in this deck, and we would go through our deck so aggressively that we do hit these 1-ofs, and that's why we're going to get away with so many 3-ofs as well. Now up next, this is the card that confuses a lot of people that I really do like myself, which is 3 of the Destiade. So Destiade, basically ignore the second effect. The second effect says at the end of the battle, this unit attack, retire 3 Shadow Army tokens to stand this unit. In Orphist, yes. In this deck, never, because you'll never have 3 Shadow Army tokens. And people go like, well, why are you running this card then? Well, the answer is simple. Read that first effect. At which part of the first effect does it say during your turn? None of them. So yes, this card says if your world is Dark Knight, it gets plus 2k power. If it's Abyssal Dark Knight instead of Dark Knight, it gets plus 5k power. So basically, on your second turn, you will always be on Dark Knight because you searched out the order and you go into Cubizia and you get to play the order and you make a Shadow Army token and you're in Dark Knight. So when you call this down and your opponent's on 10k, right, you put a grade 1 behind him, that's a 20k line. With Cubizia, you can make it 25, right? It's hitting over defensive, which means you can be super aggressive in the early game and force out your opponent's hand, which is really, really good. On top of that, because we play the second order, after we use Gravidia to get rid of our meteors and we just have the 2 set orders in the order zone, this is 15k on your opponent's turn. So that's the best part about this, is that on turn 2, you can rush with this, you can swing in on them with the 12k base that he has, and then they can't swing back because they have to commit booster. So you just made them, you force them to call down more cards that you will then next turn get rid of with Gravidia. You are literally baiting them into putting down stuff that you will destroy, and they know that. They know that you're going to destroy them, but they're still going to do it anyway because they want to get rid of him, right? Or if they don't, then that's great. You can keep him on the board and keep attacking with him even more. That's the whole reason why this card is played, is for the base power that doesn't actually go away in the opponent's turn. Like, his power gain is active on both players' turns, which is really, really vital and allows you to just be, have a strong early game with less drawbacks. Then, because we do get damage denied sometimes after using the order, Bubble Mine is nice. As a 2-of, it's pretty cool. If you're playing against someone that's smart and will try to damage deny you, this is going to come in pretty huge. And just being able to, you know, countercharge in that early phase of the game is pretty important because it allows you to actually use Gravidia's skill on the next turn. So we play 2 copies of Bubble Mine because you don't really need it beyond that turn 2, and that's it. And then we play 3 copies of the Wells. I like Wells for a multitude of reasons. Of course, the on-right effect is not active in this deck because we don't play it pure, and you're not going to hit many targets anyway. But I guess theoretically, if you wanted to, like, you could technically ride it instead of riding from right deck, which is kind of funny. But the main effect here is, of course, if your Vanguard is Gravidia Nordlinger, Soul Blast 1 and choose up to 2 meteors from your hand, put them into your order zone, and then she gets plus 2k power. Because of the way it's worded, you can afford to just play Soul Blast 1 to gain plus 2k. Therefore, it's going to be a 10k booster. And so if you put this down behind Vanguard, or if you know, the decks that run the grade 3 rear guard can make this into just a nice 10k booster, right? There are some times when you do need the extra meteors from hand, like just to kind of like, you could see your opponent hands like is super low, they don't have PGs. So you can like kind of commit with a 3 if you only had like 1 normally set. So I like that effect for like the flexibility in your gameplay. But on top of that, it's also just the fact that it's a strong, like it's a good 8k booster with a versatile usage that will otherwise make our columns be pretty strong. So I think it's good to run as a 3-of. You can cut 1 for the grade 3 that I talked about, like the common that gets plus 10k from common +1 when you are you have more cards on the field than your opponent. And then of course 4 PGs, because PGs are PGs and they're very important. No SPs, no hollows, because SPs are in my Orphis deck and my hollows are in my Seraph's now. 1 overtrigger, because of course this overtrigger, especially with your early game board, can sway games completely and you can just shut your opponent down on turn 2. You can also double this with Gravidia, which means you're going to deal like 8 damage, which is pretty strong. So yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's a strong overtrigger. I've said this enough times, you know, in all of my Brandgate deck profiles. And then we are an aggro deck, so we do play front. I did actually play draws for quite a bit because I like draws as a body that you can safely commit to the board without feeling bad about it. So because of the only 5k shield, and on top of that, you know, the draws hit you more pieces that you get in a swing with in the early game, and also just not run out of gas with. So the fronts are still better though because they're a more offensive trigger, and also the shield power can be helpful at times too. And then of course we play 4 of the effect crits, so this gives you soul for a bit of 2k power, but don't value it as much, but the soul can be nice against matchups like Seraph Snow. And then of course 4 regular crits as well, because 8 crit is life. That's basically how we roll here. And then finally 4 heals, because heals will always be very, very nice. As for the right deck discards, it's actually, I wouldn't say straightforward, but basically if you have too many rocks in your hand, you can obviously unbrick by just discarding them for the right deck. But keep in mind that you are finite on rocks, you only have 9, and every single rock is important. Otherwise, some of your grade 2 parts, if you have too many of them for the early game, can be discarded too for the right deck. And of course, also the grade 1 wells can also be a little bit, you know, sometimes you just don't need it early game as well because you have too many grade 1s in hand anyway. That does actually happen, as surprising as it is with how little grade 1s we play. And otherwise, of course, just discarding triggers for the right deck is also fine. And now, as usual, let's go over a quick mulligan segment. So, of course, we're going to have our starting Vanguard here, and I've already shuffled the majority of my deck as well, so we can just cut it here and go into our mulligan. So, let's take a look at what we draw here early. Ooh, pretty good starting hand. PGs we don't need early because, of course, we're going ham, we're going aggro. Double Destiate is interesting. It could be good, but we do need grade 1s. I do want to keep the Gravidia because Persona Ride is really strong in this deck, so we're going to try to keep these. We can also make strong columns, like even if we don't get 3 attacks, you can also make just like a big column with a Shadow Army token. We'd redraw a crit and a heal, so it somehow got a bit worse, which is unfortunate, but alas, you know, you gotta take it, gotta do what you gotta do, you know. All right, so we're gonna just shuffle and cut here, and let's get into it. So let's just say we go first, so we're gonna draw. We're gonna definitely discard a trigger because we don't really do anything with these triggers here, and write ourselves a Rootis, which will search us the order. So we'll find ourselves a world here, and we're gonna add it to our hand, and that's gonna be the turn because that's gonna just go to hand, and that's gonna be it. So we passed on a pretty okay hand. So we take a damage, it's a crit, that probably shuts down all offensive plays that our opponent had, and then we draw another Destiate. So here it's like you could even think about dropping some of your Destiates, but I'm going to hold on to them because I'm probably going to have to replace them eventually. So we ride the Cubizia here, so this way we'll be able to push some 5k power over onto the field. So we're going to probably just call down double Destiate, and here we can count +1 in order to play the order that we added from hand. So of course this will be able to make a Shadow Army token, so we're going to call it behind the Destiate here. I guess we can put it where there's a bit bit less glare. We'll give the 5k to Gravidia, this way it cannot be one card guarded, and then we're going to check a grade 1 would have been great to have here to make this into a 20. This will swing for 12, and this is going to swing for 12 plus 15, so 27. Here, some players will just deny and swing into rear and not give us damage, where some people will just kind of like swing to face and we get a trigger, so they probably like attack into one of our columns, which is fine. We're going to basically just allow that to pass, and then you get to go into your Gravidia. So here we're going to keep discarding triggers for the right deck and right into Gravidia, and of course here we get to search for 2 meteors and put them into the order zone, which will let us also draw extra cards. So these will both go into the order zone, and we're not going to soul charge because we still have 3 souls, so if we do draw into the Vanguard, we can just, you know, still use the skill immediately. Draw into a heal and a grade 1, which is okay. Here we can still call down the Destiade, and then here, because we went first, we can still make a 20k column here after we use Gravidia's effect. But do you want to use the Gravidia full effect? If we are at 2, honestly, I prefer to just use 1, and this way, you know, we just CB1, use 1 to pop 1 card and get the 15k power. I'm just going to prepare for next turn, and also not opening a rock here also means we can't set up for the 3, so that's also a little bit unfortunate, but it's okay. We get 1, 2 into our hand for next turn, so we can also use, you know, if we need to use an emergency wells to put one of them into the order zone, we can also do that. So now we're not in Dark Knight, so these will just swing for 18 as well as 25 respectively. So the columns are kind of the same because you went first, so your opponent is, you know, still like, this would have been a bit stronger, I guess, because, you know, going first your opponent's grade 2, but it's okay. That's how the cookie crumbles. So then let's say we take a couple damage, crit and PG, that's okay. We're at 4 now, and, you know, probably gonna lose at least one of our attackers here, and then try to, you know, do our best to guard the rest in order to survive here. So with this, we can basically stand and draw onto PG, which is fine, and then be able to Persona Ride and draw first from Persona Ride, and then be able to search out 2 more meteors, put them into the order zone, and thin out our deck. You can also use this time to confirm how many meteors you have left in deck. So in our case, we have only 3 left, so we still get 1 more search if we do draw into another Persona Ride, but just keep in mind that, you know, if you keep drawing into or like drive checking your meteors, you will not be seeing them as much. So now we can draw 2 from the meteor effects. So there we go, we drew into 2 crits, and then basically here we can just commit the Barringer that we drew into in order to Soul Blast 3. So our Soul Blast 3, draw a card, and she will be very, very strong now as well. And so here we can swing with the Nordlinger, and also just use her effect in order to counterblast 1, and let's say pop 3 meteors this time around. So with this, we're going to be able to actually take out 3 cards and also get the crit and the power on Gravidia. And of course, still get our twin drive, which is going to be Bowl Mine and a front, which is nice to keep pushing that aggressive. So this is a 22, 32, I guess, if you give it the trigger, and then 40. And then this is actually 30k base on its own from the skills and Persona Ride. And so this is going to be 45, which is very strong. And you kind of just keep playing it like that, you know, keep having a good board. Like, for example, if I had lost all my attackers last turn, then one of the plays would have been to, like, you know, you can promote the Shadow Army token and just call like any kind of booster behind it to make 23. So things like that are things that you have to keep in mind. And there you have it. This is Gravidia World. This is the build that I personally prefer as well, running, you know, solid attackers to make sure you have a good early game, and then still being able to rely on a lot of the Gravidia package to draw you through your deck, and also just be able to also pop your opponent's board with Gravidia's effect. It's a very strong deck, and I wish, like, if I could have changed my lineup for BRO, this would have been the deck I would have taken instead of Bastion, but I'm going to just keep playing it now at locals from here on out until D-BT04 releases, together with other decks, so you can look forward to maybe some tournament reports where I feature this deck list as well. But anyway, guys, if you need to pick up any cards, check out Parkage. You can use my discount code DifferentFight for 5% discount at checkout. And also, if you liked the video, please give it a like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe. But otherwise, look for me today, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.